Welcome to today's horror ghost stories. Don't listen to it. You know, I've been a listener of unexplained encounters for a while now, and every time I hear a story that sounds even a little bit like mine,
I get that same chill down my spine, so I figured
it's time I finally share what happened to me. This was in the fall of 2022. I live on an island in Washington state. I won't say which one, but if you've ever been up here,
you know the kind of wilderness I'm talking about. Thick, damp and ancient.
the kind of forest that swallows sand. At the time, I was 17, newly licensed, and like most teens, obsessed with my freedom. But instead of hanging around town or driving to parties, I preferred solitude. I was going through a rough patch back then, depressed.
Honestly, so the only thing that helped clear, my head was getting outside my
Favorite spot was a nearby trail called Joseph. Look, it's just a simple circle trail that winds through the woods and down to a stony beach. The parking area is basically just a gravel shoulder off a remote highway with a tiny path that leads into the trees. That afternoon, I'd had a bad day at home and needed to get away. I told my mom I was going for a walk. She told me to be safe. I grabbed my bag, my water bottle, and, because I always hiked alone, my little hunting knife. When I got there, the lot was empty. Not unusual for that time of year. It was grey out, overcast, kind of cold. Classic Washington weather. I took the wooded path and started down toward the beach. Everything was quiet. The hike was normal. When I reached the shoreline, the waves were calm, and for the first time that day, I felt okay. I walked along looking for shells and rocks, just
breathing again. Then I heard it, a quick, low humming sound. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, like something mechanical in the distance.
I looked around. Nothing. I was alone. A few minutes later, I reached the marshy part of the beach where cattails grow thick and tall.
And that's when I heard a twig snap.
Something moved in the reeds. I decided that was my cue to head back. As I walked into the forest again, I listened to the birds above me until suddenly there weren't any. The sound stopped.
All at once, no birds, no insects, nothing. It was like someone had flipped a switch and killed the whole forest. The air got heavy, like the kind of pressure you feel before a storm.
This wave of dread just hit me.
My heart was pounding. Then faintly, I heard music. It was so strange.
It sounded like someone trying to play piano, but badly. The notes were wrong, clumsy, uneven.
And it was muffled, as if it were coming from behind glass. I looked toward the sound, down a small ravine. And that's when I saw it. About 50 feet away, something dark was moving through the trees.
It looked like a huge dog, or maybe a wolf, but there are no wolves on this island. And I'd never seen a coyote here either. Still, I told myself that's what it was, just a coyote. And maybe the music was a phone or a hiker somewhere nearby. But the trail was empty. I knew it was empty. I started walking faster. The silence stayed thick, and out of the corner of my eye, I could see it, still pacing me through the trees. Then I tripped on a root. My ankle rolled hard, and I fell. I managed to limp over to a small bench a few yards ahead and sat down, trying to catch my breath. When I looked back toward the trees, the thing was gone. For a second, I thought maybe I was just scaring myself, until I heard a whistle. It was sharp and clear, echoing through the woods. I froze.
Every story I'd ever heard about whistling in the forest came flooding into my head. I pulled my knife out, gripping it so tight my hands shook, and started moving fast.
I took the field side of the loop so I could stay in the open. Behind me, I could hear footsteps. Not 4 legs, 2, twigs snapping, something following me. I was limping, breathing hard, heart racing. I didn't dare look back. When I finally saw my car through the trees, the sounds started to fade. The birds began chirping again, one by one, as if nothing had happened. and right before I reached the car,
I did something stupid. I turned around. There.
standing in the middle of the trail was what I thought was a coyote. But the longer I looked at it, the more wrong it seemed.
Its face looked off, almost human.
Its eyes didn't blink. Its front legs were bent strangely, its back legs far too long. It looked like a child's drawing of a wolf, brought to life, but wrong. It didn't move. It didn't breathe.
It just stared at me and ran.
Jumped into my car, slammed the door. Gravel flew as I tore out of there. When I got home, my mum was in the kitchen. She started to ask me how my walk was, then stopped. She said, "What happened?"
I must have looked awful, pale, shaking. I twisted my ankle, I said quickly. But she didn't buy it. "No, really," she said. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I saw a coyote," I told her. "It spooked me," she frowned. "That's weird."
"I've never heard of there being coyotes around here." I didn't respond. I just went to my room, shut the blinds, and tried to calm down. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open. My brother, let's call him Alex, was home from work. He dropped his stuff by the door and looked uneasy. I asked how his day was, and he said, "I have the weirdest story for you." I laughed nervously and told him to go ahead. He asked, "Isn't there some kind of disease deer can get that makes them act strange?"
"I think so," I said, "but not around here."
Why, he swallowed hard. "I see deer all the time when I walk home. But today, one didn't run away."
It just stood there, staring at me.
Then it stepped closer.
And in one smooth motion, it stood up. On its hind legs, he said it was a buck, tall with massive antlers.
He was so scared he sprinted the rest of the way home. At first, I tried to explain it away. Told him deer sometimes rear up when they're threatened. But he cut me off. "No," he said. "It wasn't attacking. It was just watching me, and that same cold dread crept through me all over again, because whatever I saw on that trail..."
Hadn't stayed there. It had followed me home. I didn't go back to Joseph Luke for 3 years after that. And when I finally did...
I made sure I never went alone. Next story, Under the Skin. She didn't want to go back to the mesa at night, not after the last time. But her uncle had called from the old place, voice hoarse, saying her grandmother was sick. The sky was black velvet, and the stars were so clear they hurt her eyes. No traffic, no cell service.
Only the gravel road and the hiss of tires.
Halfway there, she started seeing shapes in the sagebrush.
Not animals.
People, maybe, but low to the ground, bent wrong. She pressed the gas harder. At the house, her uncle was waiting. He didn't hug her, didn't even come close.
"Inside," he said, his voice scraping. It didn't sound like him.
It was his voice, but off flat where it should be deep, like a recording played back too slow. Grandma wasn't in her bed. The room smelled of iron and old sweat. On the dresser lay a bundle of hides, coyote, fox, something else knotted with black string. The string pulsed, almost breathing. She took a step back.
"Uncle," she whispered.
"What's this?" He smiled without teeth. He told her about the sickness.
About the hunger. About the things they didn't talk about anymore because it called them closer.
He said the only way to survive out here was to take something else's life into you, to walk in its skin.
To let it walk in yours.
Then he said softly, "You're strong."
You could do it too. She realized the bundle of hides was moving.
Something inside, pushing against the fur like a heartbeat. Her uncle's shadow didn't match his body. It stretched wrong, low and wide, legs bending like an animal's. When he stepped forward, she caught the smell, wet hair. Blood, dirt that wasn't earth.
"Put one on," he whispered. You'll never be weak again." His hands were human, but his nails weren't. The sound his jaw made when he smiled wasn't a sound any jaw should make.
He held out a pelt. It was warm. It pulsed in her hands. She dropped it and ran out into the desert. Stars above, sage scraping her legs. She didn't look back until she was a mile away. She saw her uncle standing by the door, small now in the dark. Then she saw him drop to all fours and follow, fast, silent, dust rising around him. When she reached her car, the driver's door was already open. Her grandmother sat in the seat, head bowed. She climbed in, slammed the door, trembling.
"Grandma," she whispered.
"Drive." Grandma raised her head. The eyes that looked back weren't hers. She never went back. But some nights, out on the road, she hears her own voice behind her. It's cold.
"Put the skin on."
"You'll be strong." The pelt was heavier than it looked. It trembled in her hands, warm like an animal still breathing. She could smell earth, sage, blood.
And under it all, a faint sweetness like spoiled milk.
Her uncle's voice was everywhere, not in her ears, but behind her eyes. Just one breath, just one step.
"You'll never be prey again." She wanted to throw it down, but her fingers had sunk into the fur and couldn't let go.
The hide pulsed once, twice, and then she felt it a second heartbeat in her own chest. The world tilted. The stars above her blurred into streaks. The ground rose up to meet her face. Her teeth ached. Her jaw felt too tight. Her knees bent the wrong way. Her uncle was right next to her now, only he wasn't her uncle anymore. His skin hung loose and grey, his eyes small and bright like a coyote's. His mouth split wider than it should have. He whispered, "Breathe it in." She did. It tasted like iron, pine needles, and screaming. At first it felt like strength heat in her arms, her lungs filling with wild air. She could hear mice moving under the dirt, smell a rabbit a mile away. Her heart beat like a drum, and the desert beat with it. Then the voices came, hundreds of them. Animals she had never seen, people she had never known, all speaking at once through her teeth. The pelt was inside her now, wrapping her bones, crawling under her skin. She opened her mouth to scream, but a howl came out instead. Her uncle smiled. "Now you're ours." The ground under her hands wasn't dirt anymore, but fur. Her nails bit deep grooves into the sand. Her shadow had split into two shapes, one human, one not. She could see herself from outside, a girl crouched low, eyes glowing, jaw too long. Her uncle touched her forehead. His hand burned. "You see? Not monster, not prey. You're in between. Like me." But the voices in her head were crying, clawing at the inside of her skull, each one begging to be let out. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. She ran, faster than she'd ever moved on all fours through sage and dust. The night bent around her. The stars tilted. She could taste blood in the air, her own or someone else's she didn't know. When she finally stopped, she was at the edge of the mesa, wind tearing at her fur. She looked down and saw her reflection in a pool of water between the rocks.
Not a girl, not an animal.
Something wearing both. And in the reflection, her mouth moved, but not in time with her thoughts. It whispered, "It's easier if you stop fighting." She dropped to her knees, clawing at the pelt, but it was no longer separate from her. The hide had melted into her skin. When dawn came, a shepherd found a coyote crouched by the water, staring at its reflection, making little sounds like a person trying to remember how to speak. He backed away slowly. He didn't call to it. He didn't look it in the eyes. He didn't say the name. And the thing by the water whispered in a girl's voice, "I'm still in here." The desert had gone quiet. No wind, no insects. Not even the distant yip of coyotes. She crouched under the boulders, her hands bleeding, fur peeling in patches from her arms.
Her throat was raw from screaming or howling or both.
She couldn't remember what her real voice sounded like anymore. The pelt was part of her now. Every time she tried to pull it off, it screamed without sound. But the worst part wasn't outside, it was inside. It whispered when she blinked. It moved when she was still. It watched with her, then watched without her. And slowly it made suggestions.
"You're tired.
Let me talk to them. They wouldn't help you anyway. Just for a moment. Rest." The first time she gave in, it smiled through her face and said things she didn't understand. Navajo words her grandmother used to pray with, twisted backwards and broken. Afterward, she threw up for an hour. The dirt where her bile landed started to rot. She made it back to the edge of town once. Lights, cars, voices. She could almost reach them. But when she stepped near the gas station, the clerk inside looked up and froze. He stared straight at her, eyes wide, mouth opening, like he was about to scream. Then he dropped behind the counter and never came back up. In the reflection of the glass door, she saw her silhouette, not her shape.
Not her shadow.
Something hunched, too long in the arms, with a grin stretching from ear to ear. Now at night, it controls more than her breath. It dreams for her. She wakes with dirt under her nails and dried blood on her lips, bird bones in her pockets, children's hand prints on her windows, and always, always that whisper, "You wanted to be strong." I'm just helping. But sometimes in the seconds just before sleep, she remembers the mesa, the wind, the stars, the girl she used to be, and she begs silently to anyone still listening, "Don't let me forget who I am." And somewhere deep inside, under the fur, behind the teeth, a single voice whispers back,
"You already have." The moon was a cold slash in the sky, sharp and unforgiving.
She moved through the sagebrush like a shadow folded into itself. Every sound was louder now, the snap of a twig, the heartbeat of a rabbit, the whisper of wind through dry grass. But beneath it all was another rhythm, slower, older, the hunt. She wasn't just the hunted anymore. She was the predator. Behind her, the desert cracked with movement. Her uncle, no, the thing that had worn his face, was close. It didn't need to speak. Its breath was the sound of the earth breaking, its eyes two glowing embers in the dark. They had one rule, that they do not let go of what they want. She ran, but her legs trembled, part human, part animal, neither strong enough. The hide itched and pulled, claws scraping against her skin like a warning. Her thoughts splintered. The voices inside screamed for release. The thing whispered promises of power, of escape, of freedom, but only through submission. Suddenly she stumbled. The creature was on her in a heartbeat, jaws snapping inches from her face. The world blurred. Teeth grazed her shoulder.
Fur tangled with fur. A scream tore from her throat, or was it a growl?
She fought with everything left, but it was too late.
Her uncle, or what was left of him, pinned her to the earth.
His face was a mask of madness and hunger. "You belong to me now," the transformation completed. Her body convulsed, fur spreading like wildfire, bones reshaping. She looked into the creature's eyes and saw her own fear reflected back. The last thread of the girl snapped. Morning found two sets of prints in the dust, one human, one animal fading into the desert. A single coyote howled, answering a call that had waited too long. Next story, my encounters with otherworldly things. It was a humid October evening in Rivervale, New Jersey, the kind when the air feels thick with unspoken promises. The leaves were a patchwork of fiery oranges and deep reds, a sharp contrast to the darkening clouds looming above. After a long day of making animations, I settled into my townhouse, the faint glow of my laptop screen the only light in the small living room. I was used to the quiet of the neighborhood. A string of townhouses lined the street, each echoing the bustle of family life. But tonight, the silence felt different. There was an unsettling stillness, as though the world was bracing itself for something unknown. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I heard a faint rustle outside. Normally, the sounds of the nearby river would lull me to sleep, but now they were replaced by an eerie whispering that seemed to seep through the walls. Pulling on a hoodie, I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath my weight. The air was cool, and the whispering intensified, curling around the corners of my mind. "Who's there?" I called out, but the only response was the flickering dim street lamps. Shaking my head, I retreated into the house, trying to brush it off as my imagination, but sleep evaded me. The whispers grew more distinct and unsettling. "Help us," they seemed to say, chilling my bones. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. thinking it was probably just the result of too many horror movies. But then I remembered YouTube stories, tales of otherworldly entities that lived by the river, seeking something they could never have. Just as I began to doze off, a loud knock reverberated through the house. My heart raced. Who would be knocking at this hour? I cautiously approached the door, peeking through the peephole.
No one was there.
Shaken, I opened the door slowly, revealing an empty street and flickering streetlights. Returning inside, I noticed that the temperature had dropped significantly. I rushed to close the door, but caught a glimpse of something, a shadowy figure darting behind the adjacent townhouse.
My breath hitched and I stumbled back.
Gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and stepped outside. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. The only reply was the rustle of leaves. Then I heard it again, the whispering, louder now, as if it was right behind me. I spun around but found nothing. Panic clawed at my throat as I shone the flashlight toward the sound. And that's when I saw it. A pale figure, ghastly and translucent, rising from the ground just beyond the riverbank. I stood frozen, my heart racing. The whispers became a soft, sorrowful song.
"Help us, please."
With trepidation, I edged closer, compelled by an unseen force. The figure shimmered, its features becoming clearer. A woman with hollow eyes and a mournful expression. "We are trapped," she whispered, her voice resonating inside me. "The river binds our souls." Terrified yet intrigued, I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "What do you want from me?"
I croaked. "Release us," she pleaded, extending a hand toward me, translucent fingers reaching through the air.
"Find the dark stone by the water's edge. Only then can we rest." Before I could react, she faded back into the shadows, leaving me trembling under the weight of her gaze. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, yet I was drawn to the river, the very heart of Rivervale's lore. Stepping closer to the water, the whispers mingled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant thunder. The river glistened under the pale moonlight. And in that moment, I felt the history of the place, the countless stories left untold. Bending down, I searched through the murky water, heart pounding, until my fingers grazed something cold and smooth buried in the mud.
As I pulled it out, I realized it was an obsidian stone, glimmering in the cold light.
Holding it, the whispers intensified, weaving together into a chorus that resonated deep within me. A plea, a promise, a release. With a sudden rush of fear and resolve, I dashed back to the river's edge, gripping the stone tightly. As I threw the stone into the water, a brilliant flash illuminated the dark. The river shimmered, and shadowy figures emerged again, swirling around me in a gentle breeze. Then silence fell. The air was still, the weight of centuries lifted. I watched as the last remnants of the figures drifted away, their faint whispers now turned to grateful sighs. As the first light of dawn crept over Rivervale,
I stood by the shoreline, a sense of peace enveloping me.
the stories of the river were real. The otherworldly had crossed paths with my life in a way that would forever change me. And though I had released them,
I knew I would never forget the night the whispers called my name. Next story, the Tianak and the White Lady. I was 8 years old.
we went to the upper region of my country to visit some of our relatives. It was a long drive from the city to their province. It was an old railway town surrounded by rice fields and haciendas. My grand aunt lived in the heart of the town. They had a house by the river. We stayed in her
House for a couple days and
slept in their living room. My other grand aunt and great-grandmother was living on a different side of town, more
isolated, and they were located by the railways.
We took a handcar to get to her house. They were living just beneath the bridge above the railway by a swamp. They had a bamboo house on the side. It was an enchanted place, meaning there are elementals living in their area.
I could feel their presence.
Elementals are not as bad as the ghoulish ghost. They're more upmarket. since they're not classified as ghosts, but creatures who live in a different realm than humans. They coexist with mortals. We had a good catch-up with the family. We realized it was getting dark and had to go back. The handcar was not a fun experience at night. So we were traveling on the railway back to the main road, and I saw two people standing still in the edge of a narrow, 20 meters deep canyon.
I saw an old man and a young girl whose faces seemed to be filled with scars, and they were looking at me blankly.
Up ahead was a wake I saw. There were two caskets. Handcar driver said they were harvesting their crops the previous morning when they fell into that canyon we just passed.
I felt chills. I was too scared to mention it at that time. The next night, when I was playing outside with the kids there,
I heard someone calling my name. I looked back, and I saw a woman dressed in a white dress with long black hair, pale white skin and piercing red eyes. She was tall and skinny, almost skin and bones. I screamed and ran. It was a white lady. Usually these are vengeful spirits. She loomed over me, and nobody saw her but me. My mum and grandma brought me inside the house, and I told them everything that I have been feeling and seeing spirits. They told me that they'll sort this out in the morning. They said they'll need to close my third eye that night. Everybody is sleeping. My grandma was beside me, and I was sleeping next to a curtain-covered wall. I heard a noise that woke me up, and it was coming from the wall. So I lift up the curtain, and there was a Tianak staring at me. A Tianak is an infant ghost. It had long nails, blood on its skin, sharp teeth, and a very ugly, deformed face. I screamed in terror, and it woke up everybody.
I told them I saw a Tianak, and by the window the white lady was staring at us the whole time. I don't know how I slept that night.
I remember my grandmother took me to a shaman first thing in the morning, and she fed me a banana. I felt better after. She said my third eye is completely shut, and that I won't see ungodly forces anymore.
I can only feel them, not see them. This was a long time ago. My parents and grandmother don't like when I bring this up. They said it will attract spirits and bring back my sight. Next story, the beginning, a dark family secret. Every family has secrets.
Normal families have normal secrets. Secrets are kept from being judged by others. There are good and bad secrets. This is a dark family secret. In the past, when my mother was a young girl, she studied in the best private school in her area. She had lots of friends and was well known for her outgoing personality. One day, they went on a school field trip to the another region, far from their island. They went camping, sightseeing and hiking. Mom and her classmates went to the waterfalls. They went swimming and jumping from the heights. They realized it was getting late and decided to go back to camp. They had to travel by public transport back to camp. It took about an hour. They were traveling through the forest in the middle of nowhere. There were a bunch of people inside the bus. People comes and go. Eventually a person flagged the bus to stop. Mom saw two people got in. It was a young man and an elderly lady in black. Mom described her having long white hair, long nails, and very pale skin. She sat next to Mom at the very end of the bus. Mom was sitting with her friends as well. Her friends were chatting away. It seemed that they have not noticed the lady sitting next to Mom. It was almost like nobody saw her at all. Mom struck up a conversation with this elderly woman. She asked where she was going. The lady answered back, just up ahead, in a frail, croaky voice. She asked Mom where she was and why they're here for. Mom answered her they were on a school field trip and that they went swimming at the waterfalls. In a while, Mum asked where the old woman's stop was so she can tell the driver to let her off. The woman said, "No need for that, young girl. But if you insist, you'll see a big acacia tree on your left in the next 10 minutes. I'll be getting off there." Mum smiled and nodded to the old woman. "I have a gift for you, since you were very kind to me," the old woman said.
"Please, you don't have to," Mum shyly declined.
"You must. Think of it as souvenir for your trip," the old woman said. She grabbed something from her bag. She revealed a black book and gave it to her. "I couldn't possibly take this, although it's a wonderful gift." She gave it back to the old woman. "You must have it," the old woman whispered to herself. Mum saw the acacia tree and shouted to the driver to stop as a passenger is hopping off. The woman walks out of the bus.
Suddenly the driver shouted, "Is anyone going to hop off?"
Or was that a joke? You kids, this is in the middle of nowhere.
"No one lives here." "I'm confused," told the driver. "Don't you see the old lady? She just walked past you and hopped off." The driver was as confused. "I saw no one, young lady." "That was probably a ghost. I don't have time for this. I'm going to keep driving." Irritated.
Mum's friends turned to her and said, "Yeah, what's wrong with you? You've been talking to thin air. We didn't see an old lady. Maybe you're just tired." Mum trembled in fear. Nobody saw the old woman, and she knew she'd meet with a dark force. As the time passed by, their field trip ended. They went back to their island and went home. My grandmother was waiting for her arrival. Upon seeing her daughter visibly upset, she asked her how was her trip and if anything had happened to make her upset. She told grandmother everything. My grandmother is a superstitious woman. She once said we came from a bloodline of faith healers and shamans. She had sensed a great evil hovering above my mother. She comforted Mom and told her to retire to rest in her room. Mom was unpacking her bags and suddenly she saw the same black book the old woman gave to her. She did not know how it got there.
Mom screamed frantically. Grandmother came inside and saw the book.
She knew and she felt that book is not for the living. She quickly grabbed the book outside and tried to burn it. It did not burn, it did not falter, and only then she knew this was the work of the devil. Suddenly, an old woman appeared at the gate. Smiling at my grandmother, she said, "That's mine and I have found where you live." My grandmother came to her with full force and threw the book at her.
"Don't ever come back, you devil!"
My grandmother said a few words in Latin. That seemed to chase the old woman away and disappeared in thin air. A year passed. Everyone moved on with their lives. Mum met my dad, and soon enough she was pregnant with me. They lived with my grandmother. Both of my parents were unemployed then. They were selling barbecue for a living. Despite Dad's wealthy family background, he did not get any support during my mother's pregnancy. His parents refused to accept it. Mom was in her second trimester when she started to act strange. Dad told me she started displaying incredible strength. She developed psychic abilities like mind reading and talked in tongues. One night, she woke up screaming. Dad woke up and saw her levitating up in the air.
Unable to move from fear, Dad called out as loud as he could.
Grandmother came in. The scene shook her to her core. She told my dad to call a priest and keep praying the Our Father. My grandmother came up to Mom and cited Latin chants. She demanded to leave the body in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit. She went at it to weaken the entity. For a while, Mom regained consciousness and went back to her normal self. Her eyes were filled with fear for herself and for her baby. Her eyes darkened. She was possessed again. The priest came and immediately started the exorcism. With the entity having full control, it kept banging Mom's pregnant belly.
"This child is mine. I will take her with me. She is my child."
The entity was talking about taking the unborn child. Fast forward, the exorcism was a complete success. Mom had very little recollection of the exorcism. She just said it was the old woman. She told me the baby belongs to her. After that incident, my family was never the same. We moved to a new island and started a new life. But this wasn't the end of our paranormal life. It continued and followed us for the rest of my childhood life. I will be posting more stories. I have a childhood full of them. Thankfully, this is the kind of platform where I can share these experiences. Next story, the flood. People say time slips are real. In them, you may go back in time, travel to the future, or experience the past in some way, shape, or form.
I never experienced one myself, but someone I know did.
Not only did they slip back in time, but they ended up in one of the worst tragedies in American history. To this day, they're convinced they saw the after effects of the 1889 flood in Johnstown. PA, the sights, sounds, and even smells, the Great Flood of 1889, as it's sometimes called, killed over 2,200 people, including close to 100 entire families and nearly 400 children after a preventable dam collapse occurred, despite years of issues and multiple warning signs. When the dam collapsed, the entire town was inundated. To this day, people can see what happened in the city's history center. Now for my friend, he was on the Johnstown incline plane trip when he suddenly heard a roaring sound. He looked up but didn't see a plane, helicopter, or jet, and didn't see any huge vehicles on the street below, so he didn't know what accounted for it. As he tried to figure it out, the tour guide was just saying how the dam collapse could probably be seen from the exact spot they were at. He thought it was just a coincidence and that the roaring was his imagination. When he took a walk around town, things got freakier. He was walking near the stone bridge where debris had piled up 40 feet high during the flood. As he was walking, he suddenly smelled raw sewage, trash, garbage left in the sun, and smoke. He looked to the bridge and saw a mound of mud, trees, rocks, garbage, and some green and brown liquid he couldn't identify. He also passed a hardware company, but saw a schoolhouse based on pictures he had at home from his ancestors who had lived in Johnstown after the flood. He also could smell mold, mildew, and decay, and even heard a woman crying. He looked behind him, expecting to see another tour, but no one was there. He also was dimly aware that the environment had changed. He looked around and saw people in bonnets, breeches, slacks, coveralls, and other old clothing. He rubbed his eyes, expecting to see modern things, but they were still wearing the old clothing. Now, he was getting really freaked out. It was like he had walked right from 2013 to 1889. He decided to lay low and try not to be noticed, in case his modern look was seen as something evil or that he was some kind of warlock. As he continued walking, he saw every scene of destruction, every cemetery, every makeshift morgue, dazed children, shell-shocked women, and sobbing men. He also was getting upset due to the unexplained time loop that he was in. He wanted to go back to the present however he could. When he walked back the way he came, an undertaker came out of the schoolhouse covered with mud and stains of what looked like blood and asked him, "Need some help?" My friend was really scared but managed to stammer out, "A lavatory perhaps?" The undertaker nodded and led him inside. After using the toilet, my friend pressed his head against the cool glass for a couple moments and tried to relax. He didn't know how or why he was in the past, and also didn't know how to get back. But when he walked back outside, everything was normal again. There were no flood, sad people, debris, fires, or anything. He shook his head and tried to figure out what had happened. To this day, I don't know what happened to him. Maybe it was a dream, or maybe, just maybe, he somehow entered a time warp. He doesn't know what happened either, and we probably won't ever know. All we know for sure is that he saw a replay of one of the greatest disasters in history. Next story. I don't think that was Mickey Mouse. So, I bet you all know the Mickey Mouse mascot in Disneyland.
Made to make children believe in the magic of Disneyland, but that mascot seriously freaks me out. It's just its beady little eyes that make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know it's Mickey Mouse and all, but still that costume is just freaky, and after what happened to me, I can truly say that my relationship with that costume has just gotten worse.
Really worse. I was a night security guard for Disneyland.
Which meant that I didn't sleep until 1 a.m.
And that does something to a man. Anyway, when 1 a.m. rolled around,
another guard took my place so I could get some rest for tomorrow. That's when the true horrors began. The incident happened in my 3rd month of being a security guard. I was walking around the Splash Mountain ride, which has been renovated today, when I heard footsteps behind me.
It sounded like they were running right behind me, right for me.
I whipped around to only find a yellow boot under the light of one of the lamps behind me. This happened about 11 more times, and when it happened again, I had had enough and kicked it into the dark, and an arm with a glove on its hand grabbed it in midair. It was strong too. It squeezed that thing so hard that it remained scrunched when it dropped the boot. It then walked into the light of the lamp, and it was a Mickey Mouse mascot.
I thought that was weird, because the mascots didn't appear until 11 a.m. or something, so I reluctantly stepped into the light with the mascot, and when I did, a snarling sound came from it. I jumped back.
No human could make a sound like that. Imagine a dog growling overlapped with bubbles coming out of the water in a pool or something.
That's what it sounded like.
It then said in a Mickey Mouse voice to stay there while it gets something, and that's what I did. It stepped back into the dark, and after 10 minutes, it stepped into the light again, and what it brought with it almost made me scream. A whole bunch of mascot heads were in its hands, and it looked like they had blood flowing from them at their bottoms. The Mickey Mouse mascot spoke before I could, and it said in a devilish tone, "I don't want to hurt you. I want you to join me. I work for the devil himself, and you are the one he wanted me to seek.
Pick your favorite head, put it on, and you'll be in true peace." There was no way I wanted to join something that worked for the devil. No way, no chance. I hit the mascot so hard that its mask fell off, and then I screamed in horror.
It was an amalgamation of eyes and flesh.
Eyes were everywhere on its face. "Well, if you don't want to accept, I guess I'll just drag you down myself," it said as it moved to me, and by then I made a beeline to the exit, not stopping until I made it out.
The whole time the footsteps were behind me, but there were like 10 of them. It clearly had more buddies, and it was clear that it, along with them, wanted to force me down to the deepest pits of hell, whether I liked it or not. I made it out safely and turned around to see 10 people, all in Mickey Mouse, Goofy, Donald Duck, and Minnie Mouse mascot heads, like it was controlling their minds or something. They all then went into the Disney castle and were gone, just like that. I quickly drove back home and filed my resignation letter 4 hours later. I'm about 42 years old now with 1 kid, a wife, and a new job. But I can't stop thinking about that one day ever since it happened. I told my wife about it, about my never-ending trauma about the incident, and she actually kind of believed it. At least it was enough for her to calm me down when I had flashbacks about it. To this day, I wish those 10 people were okay.
And I still wonder what would happen if I fulfilled Mickey's request and put the mascot head on me. Next story, Slender Man took my son. So I bet you all have heard of Slender Man, right?
Tall body, long fingers, suit and tie, tentacles, but most importantly, no face. None at all. Well, during our trip to a campground in our state, 2 hours away I feel like we saw him. I'm a man in his 30s with a wife and 2 children, whom I will name W and A. My wife was my best friend in high school, and when we eventually gained feelings for each other, she became my girlfriend and then my wife. I will call her C for this story. When A are little youngsters with their lives ahead of them, W is the oldest and A is the youngest. We also had a 3rd child named J who we lost. This tells the story of how we lost our little J. It was summer when we decided to go camping to a place called Happy Fields Campgrounds. Sure, the name sounds suspicious, but I went there a lot when I was little,
and I wanted to give our kids the same joy that I had there.
Jay was the most excited to go, which was because he was 8 at the time. C and I wanted to get there as quickly as possible so all the spaces wouldn't be used up. It was a popular place after all. When we got there, J and A were stoked to have some fun, so I decided to watch them as they went on the swings, slid down the slides and played some mini golf, which I participated in, while W helped C with the barbecue and food. It was a good first day, except for the night, when Jay swore he could see a tall person beckoning him in his dreams, and when he got closer, the thing would lung towards him, grabbing him in the neck, and Jay would wake up screaming and crying. C and I decided that it was just childish nightmares that Jay was having, but we were still kind of concerned. This happened for 2 more days, until on the 4th day, it didn't grab him by the neck. Jay said it just said to him in a devilish voice, "I know who you really are now. Now come with me, child. You and I will be friends in your dreams, but also in real life." Jay warned us that he was coming for us, for him, and we need to protect him. C and I grabbed flashlights and went outside, where we looked for a good 5 minutes. When we were just about to give up, we saw him, tall, suit and tie, white skin, tentacles, but most importantly, the face. There was no face on it. We stared at it for about 2 minutes, which was the longest 2 minutes of my life, when it finally spoke to us in a devilish voice. "Joshua is my child now, not yours. Now back off and let it happen." We saw Jay stumble out of the RV, his face pale, just like he was possessed or something. He slowly limped toward the creature as we tried to stop him, but we couldn't. We were stuck in place like the creature was holding us down or something. When he approached it, he took the creature's hand and they walked into the deep forest. We quickly dialed 911 after that, and police scanned the whole area. No trace of him being there. We left quickly after that, and while on a freeway, A said, "Daddy, where's Josh?" I told her that he was going home in another car. I feel like she still hates us after we lied to her. It has been 14 years since the incident, and the police did manage to find Jay, who was forcefully shoved inside thorns and was found mangled and, of course, dead. My 2 kids are now in high school, and we never really recovered from that fateful day. But something tells me the creature, identified as Slenderman, wants more from us, because in those summers where the incident happened,
I swear I can see him in the corner of my eye.
carrying around the corpse of J.A.'s, I'm typing this right now, there is someone at the door patiently waiting for us to let them in.
I wonder who it is.
Next story, my house is haunted. I'm currently 14 years old, but this story took place a couple of years ago, back in 2020, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time, like many other students, I was attending school remotely from home. The world felt strange and a little eerie already, with everything shut down and everyone trying to adjust to a new way of life. But something even stranger happened to me that year, something I still haven't been able to fully explain. It was a regular weekday, and I was home alone, attending my online classes. My dad was out working, my mum had taken my younger brother to a doctor's appointment, and I was the only one in the house. Everything was quiet, just the usual hum of electronics and the faint sound of my teacher's voice through the laptop. That's when I first heard it. Muffled voices, as if a group of people were talking just outside. At first, I thought maybe someone was walking by or talking in the front yard. Curious and admittedly a bit unsettled, I paused my class and got up to check.
I walked to the front window and looked outside. Nothing.
The yard was empty.
I even opened the front door to get a better look. No one was there.
The street was completely deserted, which wasn't too unusual during lockdown, but it made the situation feel even more surreal. I shook it off and went back to my class, thinking maybe I had imagined it, or that the sound had come from a neighbor's house. But later that same day I heard it again, whispering, clearer this time. It didn't sound like a TV or a podcast. It was like actual people talking in hushed tones right outside my room. This time my stomach dropped. I checked every room in the house, even the basement and the backyard. I looked behind doors, under beds, everywhere. Still, not a soul to be found. Over the next few weeks, the whispers returned several times.
Always faint, always just out of reach.
They never happened when anyone else was home, only when I was alone. At first, I kept it to myself, thinking maybe it was just in my head or something I didn't fully understand yet. But then something changed. A while later, my younger brother came to me looking kind of shaken. Out of nowhere, he asked, "Have you ever heard voices in the house?"
Like whispering?
My heart practically stopped.
I hadn't told him anything, but he described the exact same thing.
The faint voices that sensed that someone was nearby even though the house was empty. It was then I realized this wasn't just my imagination. He had experienced it too. Now 5 years later, it still happens, though less frequently. Sometimes when I'm alone, especially on quiet days, I hear those same voices. It's never loud enough to understand what's being said, just soft murmurs that seem to come from nowhere and disappear the moment I try to find the source. I've told a few people about it, but most just laugh or suggest it's the wind or the house settling. Some say it could be a side effect of isolation or stress from that weird time we all lived through. Maybe they're right, but part of me believes there's more to it, something we can't explain with logic or science. I'm not saying my house is haunted,
I don't know what it is.
but I do know this. I wasn't the only one who heard it. And to this day, whenever I'm alone and everything is still, I find myself listening, half expecting the whispers to return. Next story, the alien boy. This happened when I was in my early teens, maybe 12 or 13. My twin brother and I were playing hide and seek with one of our friends. To give context, we were at my parents' house. My parents live in the country on 10 acres of woods with hundreds of acres of public land behind their property. The property next to my parents' house was vacant at the time. It had a big field of pine trees that ended into a clearing with a sand pit. This was about 100 yards away from the back of our house. We played over on that vacant property all the time and no one really seemed to mind. Anyway, the way we played hide and seek was you could hide anywhere on the property and could even wear camouflage to help you blend in. So sometimes it took a while to find everyone. It was getting late in the day, just about dusk. The time of day where you can still see things in the distance, but they are mostly just silhouettes. My friend and I were searching for my brother. He was good at hiding, and we were getting frustrated not being able to find him. We were about to give up when I suddenly felt a wave of fear hit me.
I had no idea where this came from.
At the time, we were standing right behind my house, so it was a very safe area. Something inside me told me I had to look at the pine tree field. As I did, I saw some movement at the end of the pine tree field that borders the clearing and sand pit. I chuckled a bit and pointed the movement out to my friend, assuming it was my brother moving around, and we had finally found him. I was so wrong. My friend and I started to walk towards the moving figure, calling out to it like it was my brother.
That's when the figure took off.
To our collective horror, we watched as a small humanoid figure took off running from the pine tree field, through the sand pit and clearing and into the woods. While it was running, it turned and looked at us. It was terrifying. We didn't understand what we were seeing. It had the stature of a boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, but it didn't move right. It ran with its arms down and back slightly. The legs moved in an awkward gait. The eyes were too big for its head, which was also too big. It was mostly slender except for a large potbelly. We couldn't see any clothes on this figure, but it also didn't look naked. The eyes were dark, black. It moved with such ease over that deep sand. Time seemed to stand still while this thing looked at us. We were frozen. We finally snapped out of it and we both ran back towards the house, tripping and falling over each other as we ran. We stopped and looked back and didn't see the figure. We tried to discuss what we saw. Maybe it was my brother acting goofy. Maybe it was a neighbor kid. As we were talking about it, my brother popped out from the bushes just feet from us, asking what was wrong. My friend and I freaked out again and ran inside, my brother following us. When we explained to him what we saw, he said it definitely wasn't him. He had been right next to us the whole time. But from his point of view, he couldn't see the clearing or the pine tree field, so he didn't see what we saw. Needless to say, we were very freaked out. We told my mum, and apparently a few nights prior, she had a similar encounter. She had let the dogs out at night one more time before going to bed. They started barking and going crazy, so she turned on the back light. That light reached just barely into the edge of the woods. Just in the tree line, she saw a small humanoid figure staring at the dogs. Again, she described it being about the height of a 5 to 6 year old boy, but no other definitive features or clothes. She assumed it was one of the neighbor kids and just brought the dogs inside. We only had one neighbor at the time that had kids, but their kids were our age or older, so there's no way it was one of them. When we talked to our neighbors about it, no one had any small kids visiting in that time frame. It's been about 15 years now and we haven't seen anything like that since. The best I can come up with is a possible alien sighting, but I just don't know.
I still get nervous when walking in those woods by myself.
Especially at night. Next story, my 2 haunted houses. Hey, I'm not really sure how to start this, but I've got a few unexplained experiences that I'd like to share. They might not be the scariest things you'll hear, but they're interesting to say the least. For a bit of background, my parents divorced when I was younger, and one thing led to another, and they ended up living right next door to each other, in the sense that the houses shared the same roof, same veranda and driveway, but are 2 completely separate houses. I'll start with the earliest experiences and end with the more recent ones. When I was around 10-11, The after-school routine was that I'd get dropped off at home by the bus at around 3:30 after school.
And I'd be home alone until 4:30 when my mum would get back from work.
I would usually take the time to myself to gorge on all the junk foods in the cabinets and watch TV. One afternoon, as I was inhaling some chips, I think it was around 4, I
Heard the fly screen back door open, and then I heard my mum's voice even though she wouldn't be home for another half an hour. Open the door! I sat up on my bed, earning a startled look from my cat who had just gotten settled. Mum?
I called back, getting ready to go and answer the door for her. No response. I paused, confused that she hadn't answered me. I stood up and walked over to the window to see if she was there. Nothing. I stood there, confused for a second, before sitting back down on my bed and resuming whatever I was doing. But a few minutes later, I heard her voice again, but this time it sounded like she was distant or trying to talk underwater. Ah! I paused, confused as to why she had sounded so strange. I tried to play it again in my head, but it had happened so quickly that it was hard to bring back. I walked back over to the window and looked out again, but there was still nothing. I grabbed my chips and the cat and decided to relocate myself to the living room, which is further away from the back door. Nothing else notable happened that day. The next story is one from my dad's house, later that same year. For more context, I'm only with my dad every Wednesday and every second weekend. And since my dad worked an hour away, he would take a while to get home. So I would be alone until 6 come after school. I stepped off the bus on one of these Wednesdays right away, noticing the heaviness in the air that wasn't usually present. I walked up the stairs to my house, maybe a little quicker than necessary, as I'm quite easily to spook. I shut the front door after opening it and stepping inside. I walked down the hallway, dumping my bag by the door.
I sat down on the floor of my bedroom,
relishing for a moment at being at home before turning on my iPad to watch something while I draw. At around 4:30, I remember this as I checked the time after the encounter. I heard footsteps walking up to my bedroom window. They were heavy and bipedal, making a crunching sound against the gravel. The footsteps stopped in front of my window. I wasn't alarmed at first, just confused as I thought my dad was back from work and was just trying to scare me. Hey,
I heard him call out.
He didn't sound weird or anything, just his comforting accent and playful voice. Dad? I called back, confused. I paused my show and stood up, preparing to pull the curtains back to look outside. No response. Just as I was about to pull the blinds back, the window began to shake violently. I stepped back, surprised and confused.
How was he shaking the window?
Our house is old, and our windows are sealed tightly into the walls, and shaking them as violently as he was right now. But just as I was about to pull the curtains back to look out, the shaking stopped, and when I did look out,
nothing was there. I looked around out my window for a moment, confused and a little creeped out.
But I merely shrugged and went back to watching my show until my dad got back. Fast forward around 1 to 2 years, when I was 12 and I was 13, there was a lot of tension at my dad's house as he had made changes to my room without my permission, which I won't go into as it's not relevant. Because of this, I rebelled and refused to sleep in my new room, which had always given me a bad vibe. So instead, I slept in the studio on the spare bed. For a bit of context, you had to go through a door between the kitchen and old bedroom, and you'd enter a more outdoory type space, which had the bathroom and laundry in it. At the back of this room, there was the door to the studio. Anyways, back to the story. I had been lying in bed for ages, unable to fall asleep due to the 2 possums on or in the roof who were either fighting or
having a good time. I laid there, staring at the ceiling as I waited for my eyelids to start drooping when my ears fixated on a sound.
The sound of joints popping. I froze, suddenly alert as I heard slow, dragging footsteps walk slowly up to the studio windows. I was suddenly very glad that the curtains were closed as my eyes remained fixated on the sound. my ears deaf to the possums. I could see a humanoid silhouette through the curtains. The worst part was that I could hear it breathing. Slow and raspy breaths that sounded like someone with pneumonia who had been smoking for 50 years was breathing through their mouth. I was still, eyes wide, and fixated on the shape. I was too scared to notice the possums had gone quiet. There was the sound again of popping joints as the figure raised its hand and placed it on the window. I wanted to pull the covers above my head so bad. I wanted to scream and cry, but I also didn't want the thing outside to know I knew it was there. I heard more popping as it began to tap on the glass, and then
I thought I heard it speak. Help. I need...
Inhale. Help? It was raspy and inhuman, making my skin crawl and my hair stand up on end. Help. It groaned again, this time softer. The cracking sound returned, the heavy breathing still audible as the figure drew back its hand from the glass, and I heard its dragging footsteps get further and further away. Soon it was completely gone, and the possums resumed their sounds. I honestly do not know how I fell asleep that night, but I did. The next morning at breakfast, I tried to tell my dad what happened, but he merely grinned and made a joke, clearly disbelieving the experience as a dream. I had been hoping to never experience something like that again, but unfortunately that wasn't the end of it. This experience is more recent.
Only a few months ago as of writing this.
It was around a year after the last experience, and was a warm summer night at around 7. My mum had let our cat outside, Savannah, a few hours before, and she had been hiding under the house ever since, stubbornly refusing to come out. My friend, who I will refer to as S, and I were trying to coax her out with treats, but to no avail. "Savannah,"
S called out, shining her phone light between the wooden planks to try and catch my cat's eye shine. "Savannah, treat!"
I said, trying to sound tempting. I could see my cat's white form crouching to the back of the space. She meowed defiantly. Savannah is a Siamese, and they are a very vocal breed. Eventually, we managed to pull the cat out from under the house, and S carried her up into the house, jokingly telling her off in a baby voice. I didn't follow though. But looking back on it, I wish with every fibre in my body that I had. I continued to crouch in the garden, shining my phone light around the underneath of my house between the wooden planks.
Interested to see what was under there, when
The light caught on 2 eyes. They were small and were reflecting red. I froze, startled but not scared yet. At first I thought it was a possum, but then again, possums don't go under houses. If anything, they're in the roof.
And these eyes?
They were too small and too high off the ground. There was a rumbling noise like thunder coming from under my house. That's when I stood up and bolted inside to my friends, shutting the door as casually as I could. The rest of the night went on without incident, fortunately, and I haven't seen the thing since. But what really creeped me out is a few weeks ago, my dad called me up to tell me that while he was walking through the doors of my old bedroom, the same one where I heard his voice, he heard a woman's voice say, "Hello," in a quiet, causal voice. He told me with a sort of childlike excitement that he had greeted it back and gone back to what he was doing. His experience caused me to think about my own, but I didn't share them with him, and that's it. Again, I'm truly sorry if it wasn't as scary as what you normally hear.
These are my experiences, Zach.
Thank you for listening, and if you have any idea what it might be, please let me know. I live in Australia if that helps. Stay safe.